Conceive, believe, achieve.
This is former UFC middleweight champion of the world, Michael Bisping.
Paddy the Baddy here. You're listening to Combat Sports UK.
And you're watching Combat Sports UK.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Combat Sports UK boxing podcast. Plenty of talking points this week. But interestingly enough, Jared's not here, so we've fetched in an MMA guy. Taylor, how's it going, mate?
All good, man. All good. I'm kind of feeling in very, very odd territory, a bit like Claude Makélélé whenever he got into the attack in half when he played for Chelsea. Couldn't get a nosebleed. I don't really know what's going on where I am. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah.
How was your holiday? Quick 5 days off.
Yeah,
week.
good, mate.
We gave you a bit of stick on the MMA podcast. So, Alex.
Yeah, I've been. I went over. I ditched both basically. Dipped in and heard Alex sort of taking the moral high ground. So avoided that one. Avoided any outbursts, but it was good, mate. Went away to Great Yarmouth for the week, just with the wife and the little boy. So that was bang on. Not quite as exotic as your break though, mate.
No, break was nice. Bit of Italy, nice bit of pizza. It was bloody hot though. Geez, 30 degrees plus humidity. I was struggling, mate. I was struggling. But great trip. Back and refreshed, ready to go. Ready to have a little rant.
Well, do you know what, mate? It's funny because I got back on Friday evening. I settled in, I settled down, I caught up with some of the weigh-ins and the press conferences and all that sort of stuff for both the boxing and the UFC. And I thought, I'm looking forward to jumping back in now. I've been starved for a week, kind of missed all last week's stuff, so it was. I was looking forward to jumping back in, and the UFC definitely pulled me back in, mate. But that's about as far as it goes. I mean, do you know what? It'll be interesting to get another side of this because obviously I do follow boxing and MMA sort of side by side, and you're very much based in MMA. So there's a lot of things different between the two sports, and often I come on this podcast and just moan, and Jared tries to kind of lift the mood and be the optimist and put the positive spins on everything, whilst I just bitch and moan about everything. So it's going to be a little bit like that today, mate, unfortunately. But we'll start off. Unfortunately, this is what bothers me, right? And I'm going to go straight in. As a boxing fan, there's nothing more frustrating than being asked, "You watching the boxing this weekend?" When they're not talking about the actual boxing fights going off. They're talking about this shit, this misfits bollocks. That's what they're talking about. And you kind of, as a boxing fan, you're like, yes, I am watching the boxing. Are you? Because I know what you're talking about is not what I'm talking about. So, I mean, I threw this one in. It's funny because I sit here and I talk to Jared and, we have a bit of backwards and forwards and we have our debating points and we'll talk about the positives and we'll talk about the negatives. But because of what's happened this week, you've had to step in, and I thought this is a bit of a curveball for you as well. But I thought as soon as we were a bit change of personnel, I'd bring in somebody else to help us out a little bit. Somebody that's helped me through some tough times watching the boxing, mate. And I don't think I could get through this one without him. So there's a couple of beers stacked all waiting.
I think that about sums it up. A big swig.
and they're going to hopefully see me through. So, yeah, obviously we're going to dive straight into KSI, Tommy Fury, mate, and all the chaos that unfolded with that. You're an MMA guy, so obviously the Dylan Dennis side of this probably raised a few eyebrows and made you kind of tune in and see what was going off, and it kind of captures the imagination of the public, the general public, these sorts of things. So what was your view on the event itself, the idea, the concept, and just everything that you've seen throughout this week, really?
I mean, it's almost so much flying around in my head about this. It was almost like, okay, how to generally get a hold of what the hell has been going on. Because I texted you, when was it? I think Sunday we were texting back and forth when I got back to Germany after flying and everything. And I said to you, all I've seen on my social media is this crap. My social media, like you said, I'm an MMA fan, I'm an MMA guy. My social media
I lost you then for quite a while, mate.
Okay.
You were just literally getting started. I just said, what was your kind of take on it? And you were saying about it kind of pulling you in, but you might be better off starting again because it just,
Yeah.
you just froze my side completely. I couldn't see or hear you.
No worries, no worries. I'll start again. So
I
yeah,
haven't got a clock.
the thing for me, right, that jumped out about all these shenanigans and everything like that was, okay, first of all, where do I look? Secondly, what the hell is going on? It was kind of like a before and after. Obviously, I was traveling, so I missed quite a bit of it, and I kind of saw through CSUK this was happening, that was
Mhm.
happening, and whatever, and I paid some attention to it. I remember John Fury flipping the tables however many weeks ago that was. So, you're aware of it and everything, but what really, really got to me and what really annoyed me is that when I opened, because I usually save the UFC for the Sunday morning when I wake up, and then I look at social media and catch up on, whatever. And when I did that and I opened up Instagram and Twitter, all of the MMA outlets that I follow, I don't follow boxing outlets, Fight Disciples aside, probably. I don't follow boxing outlets. All of
Yeah.
those outlets just had that, this misfit. I'm not even going to use the word boxing because it isn't. I'm just going to use the word misfit. This misfit rubbish. So, in general, before we dive into specific bits and pieces, in general, for me, it was frustrating
Yeah.
because I don't want to be seeing that crap. I just want to be seeing more about Edson Barboza and things like that, which obviously we'll talk about on the MMA pod, but that's what I tune into those outlets for. I get it, right? They do numbers, they do engagements on accounts and whatever. The Fight Disciples were talking about it on their podcast yesterday, saying that they
Yeah.
did the Talk Sport Live broadcast.
20,000. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was 20,000 views on their Talksport watch along for Daniel
Usyk.
Dubois and Usyk, and it was just over 2 million for KSI and Tommy Fury.
I mean,
It's just
it's insane. It's insane. But yeah, I mean, as an outlooker, which I was at the time during fight week because I was traveling, I was just like, what is this circus? Like, what on earth is going on? It didn't pique my interest to think, I've got to go and watch those. I've got to go and watch
yeah.
Misfits. So where do you want to start with kind of the specific? I've got
Well,
loads of points. So where do you want to
I
start?
mean, they call it misfits, and really they should call it mishits because there's nobody that I saw on that show particularly there that was capable, especially in the co-main and the main event, of actually landing shots. It should be called mishits. It's frustrating, mate, because I'm going to start with the press conference and all the shenanigans there and touch on that quickly and I'm actually going to talk about John Fury. And the reason I want to talk about John Fury is John Fury's 60 odd years of age, right? If my dad, who was also 60 odd years of age, was out in public grabbing his bollocks, chucking tables over, whipping his arse out at YouTubers, I'd be. It's not the first time it's happened. He's an embarrassment, mate. He really is. He's 65 years of age. If he was my dad, I'd be saying to another family member, "Can you take him for a bite to eat or something on Saturday night? Because he's not fucking coming near me. He's an embarrassment." I would. I honestly would. He's
I
just,
can't disagree.
there's certain things of John Fury where I watch and I see the comedy value in it, and I see why some people might say, "Yeah, that's quite funny." And there's occasions where it is, but you just got to reel it in a little bit, man. It's people like John Fury trying to start fights, arguing with everybody, fucking doing all this sort of shit. It just that's a bad example, It's but then you go on to you look down the card before the event starts, and you've got Salt Pappy, Dean the Great, fucking Callum the Cock. They've all got stupid fucking names. They're not real people. They're not real names. They're just influencers off YouTube that do absolute fantastic numbers because they're popular amongst kids, not adults, not fight fans, just kids. And then they go and perform the way they did. The press conferences, and they do all that sort of stuff. It's just WWE, but cheesy, and it's not scripted. It's just a bunch of arseholes just prattling around.
And there's real consequences to it because they're actually going in the ring and hitting each other. And WWE, they ain't. It's staged.
Yeah. But the problem is they go in and they dub it as professional boxing, which is not what it is. You know, we've got 6 rounders there where they're hugging and kissing and fucking, you know, trying to lick each other's earlobes. It's not boxing. And the problem with it is it's on DAZN, right? And it's on DAZN pay-per-view. People are paying, you know, people that don't have dodgy streams are paying good money to watch absolute shite that is dubbed as boxing, that is covered by people who cover boxing on a channel which covers, and you've got all these different programs where you've got, you know, people running up fucking hamster wheels on slippery, you know, donuts or something like that. That's the kind of shit this is. Chuck it on Sky One, chuck it on Sky Atlantic or ITV2 or something like that, somewhere where you put the rest of the comedy stuff. It should follow only Fools and Horses. That's the kind of stuff that it is. It's not real. It's just shit. And it's the problem is, like you said, I follow MMA and boxing media, and I'm seeing boxing outlets covering this shit. And the reason that people are interested, people are tuning in, people are watching that. That's what they're looking for. And it bugs me a little bit, mate, because there was a couple of, you know, really good fighters fighting on Saturday night in the world of boxing. Nobody knows about it because it doesn't receive the same amount of promotion as this Misfit stuff does. And that for me is what ticks me off as a boxing fan. Because I guarantee you now, if we'd not have had a conversation before we started this podcast, you wouldn't know about Janibek fighting, you wouldn't know about Tim Tszyu fighting. You would just be talking, the only boxing you're aware of this weekend really would have been KSI, Tommy Fury, Logan Paul, and Dylan Dennis, and all the other pillocks on there. So,
pillocks, that's a great word. I've heard that in ages. Yeah, I mean, it's such a, I don't know how you begin to unpack what that was, and I get it from where you're coming from because you're a genuine boxing fan, and what I compare it to, right? When you look at other sports and you say, okay, would this happen in other sports, or what similar happens in other sports, right? I compare it to football, which is probably my first sport. You have the soccer aid game. That is the closest you get to, the closest. It's worlds apart, obviously, right? Look at how they handle soccer aid. It's for charity. It's not a serious game. They have ex-pros in there and they have celebrities, right?
Yeah.
In this thing, this Misfit stuff, you've got some similar aspects. You don't have the charity side of it, obviously, but you do have that it's not counted on professional records. I wouldn't call any of them professional boxers, but Tommy Fury claims to be one. And you have some sham, I don't know, whatever it is, boxing commission that's regulating it or whatever. But they are, you know, it's different to WWE, like we said earlier, because they are actually hitting each other and there are actual consequences. It's not in the case of KSI because that kid didn't seem to know how to throw a punch. I'll come on to him a bit later. Back to what you started with John Fury. To me, he looks like somebody who's on coke or is a drunk. Whenever I've seen him recently, he's one of those two things, right? If that's just him as a person, whatever. I totally agree with you. What is a 60-year-old man doing, getting involved with crap like this and behaving in the way he was and just going on like that? And the biggest bugbear for me is, you mentioned the target audience, right? The target audience is what I work with on a day-to-day basis, right? As a teacher. So for me, that's where it really gets under my skin, because they're directly influencing the people I work with on a daily basis. And I see it on the bottom line, right? I have kids today talking about that, right? So I have to kind of steer them down that path of whoa. Be careful what you wish for here. The guys are very astute in terms of their business acumen or whatever, because that's what it is, right? There's a reason they're doing it. It's making money somehow, whether that's through pay-per-view or how many tickets they're selling, they're making money. KSI, you know, he's got his business endeavors with his stupid drink, and he's a rapper and all this kind of thing, right? So these people aren't idiots, but what they're doing is the bottom line effect and who this is targeted at. And that's where I have a real problem with this, because it's It's incredibly, what's the word, irresponsible of them to behave the way they were, to put on the
Yeah.
show that they did. KSI turning up in a bloody Lamborghini, Tommy Fury walking down, because it's not like the WWE where it is on, what's it called? It was on post Watershed. This kind of was, and it kind of wasn't.
Yeah.
It's in such a
Mhm.
weird place, and that's
Well,
the bottom line of what
I
really
mean,
gets to me.
yeah, I mean, one of the things you touched on there, mate, is, and you're absolutely right. You talk about the watershed, and another thing that was a bugbear of mine, and only because I was slightly jealous for boxing, is that because I followed the UFC and MMA as well, and I'm equally as invested in both. MMA is very different to boxing. Where MMA fans will go for a drink, they'll have a laugh, they'll do all that sort of stuff that with the mates, but they generally want to get in for the first fight. They want to watch all the fights. They might pick one that they think is going to be a snooze fest to go out and grab a drink, but they're straight back in to watch it. Maybe miss the round or something like that.
Yeah.
With boxing, it's not like that. You get a few fans of certain fighters in nice and early. People from the same village or the same town or any of that sort of stuff. But you don't get them up, and the arena doesn't start filling up till 9, 9:30.
Yeah.
Because they're only interested in kind of the co-main and the main. And the main reason for that is because boxing doesn't do well enough at putting on full cards. You know as well as I do with the UFC and MMA, you can start and you can watch the first 5 cards could be the best 5 fights. Sorry, the first 5 fights could be the best 5 fights on that card. You just don't know what's going to happen. It's not like that with boxing. It's going to be a bag of shit up until you get to the top 2 fights. So you don't bother. But I was watching this one on TV, and you've got KSI and all them. They're all at the top of the card, and you've got all these other nobodies fighting underneath that, and the arena's packed. It's absolutely rammed. They've all got their phones out. They've all got their torches out, like a fucking Taylor Swift concert. I mean, you compared the Soccer Aid thing, right?
Yeah.
You compared the Soccer Aid, and you said it's it's football, but it's not a competitive match. It's not really generally footballers that are involved in it. It's other people that aren't good at that, but it's about putting on a show. And this is what this is. It's like an Ollie Murs concert, right? He's a shit singer, but he's a good entertainer.
Yeah.
And that's what this is. These lot are entertainers, but they've got no talent. And that's not a real dig at Ollie Murs. I'm just, for some reason, that's the first name that came into my head. But can dance and sing and get a crowd, into the thing or whatever else, but isn't the best vocalist, let's be honest. And this is what this is. They're absolute shitboxers, but they're good at gathering an audience and sucking people in to watch it. I mean, if you look at, we'll come on to him in a minute, but you look at Dylan Dennis, for example. Dylan Dennis has done absolutely nothing in a professional career in mixed martial arts or boxing to make you think that he can fight. He hasn't even done that in street fights. He's been ragged all over by chocolatiers and all sorts. So, we'll jump straight in because I'm not going to talk about the fights, mate, because I don't really care. We talk about KSI. I never tuned in. I put it on before the UFC started, and I never flicked back.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lie. I was in the process of flicking back when I looked on Twitter and saw that Dylan Dennis and Logan Paul were just doing the ring walks, and I thought, do I watch it because I'm doing this podcast? Do I not? Do I stick with the UFC? And I flicked it over, and I went, what the fuck am I doing? I picked the remote back up, flicked it straight back to the UFC, and thought, if I'm going to watch it, I'll watch it later. So I haven't watched the fights. I've seen the highlights. I've seen little clips, but I didn't watch the main event and the co-main event. And you know why? Because I see people on social media talking about these fights and saying, oh, Dylan Dennis has took the piss. He's robbed people. No one should have let him go anywhere near a boxing ring or an MMA octagon or whatever again. With KSI and Tommy Fury, they can't fight. They're no good. Yeah. Which bit of that didn't you know before the bell rang?
Yeah, exactly.
Because trust me, there's boxing fans out there won't have watched that because they knew full well that it was going to be an absolute bag of shit. And more for all those people moaning, more fool you because you're part of the problem. Tuning in, watching that shit, you got exactly what you deserved. Don't give them the airtime. Leave them to entertain the kids. That's my message. But I mean, KSI, I've not really got anything to say because he's just a YouTuber and I don't really care. I've just heard that he was terrible and trying to hug all the time. And some people said he won the fight, some people said he didn't win the fight. I couldn't give a bollocks either way.
Yeah.
When we talk about Tommy Fury, I put it out on Twitter on my own socials saying Tommy Fury's talking about, in the build up to this about world titles, and he's talking about X, Y, and Z. I want to go on and do this, And then after the fight, he's saying, I'm done with these YouTubers and I'm done with it. He shouldn't be, because these are the only people he can beat. Tommy Fury is not good. The fact that he scraped through against Jake Paul and has now scraped through a contentious decision against KSI shows you that he's just as shit as they are. The fact he can't put them away is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. But it's not surprising. It's not surprising again. When the Jake Paul and Tommy Fury fight got made, I saw it as a genuine 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. He's got this reputation as being a professional boxer because he's had a few professional fights. There's a kid goes down the local pub near me who's had a few professional fights. Probably got a better record than Tommy Fury. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't mean he's any good. Doesn't mean he's ever going to win a British title or a Commonwealth title or anything like that. Let's not even talk about world titles.
No.
Tommy Fury needs to stay in this world. His biggest accomplishment is being on Love Island. Yeah. And that's what he needs to concentrate on, doing this kind of crap, because he's got no future in boxing. He steps up in boxing, somebody would give him an absolute hiding. So that's all I've got to say on that one. If you've got anything to add, please do. If not, I'm going to jump on to Dylan Dennis.
On Tommy Fury?
Yeah, KSI, Tommy Fury. Have you said if there's anything to go at?
No, I mean, the pair of them, I mean, it's just, I just look at it and I just think, from Tommy Fury's side of it, it must, I want to get in his head to think his big brother is arguably one of the greatest boxers of this time, right? Mm-hmm. As in the world that Tommy Fury is living in, his big brother is one of the best. He's definitely up there, right? Mm-hmm. What must be going through his mind when he's thinking, I'm going to go and fight KSI, who's a YouTuber, he's got a fake energy drink, and he came out in a green Lamborghini, and he was giving it all that in the run up, saying he's going to knock him out and all that kind of thing. It's just like, what must be going through his head? I can't understand, aside from trying to get famous. Exactly, maybe, yeah. How can you can't massage your ego with £10 notes, £50 notes, right? Like, surely you must be looking at that thinking, oh, I'm a bit of a failure of this family. Like, the rest of the family's all boxers and have had a good heritage in boxing, the Fury name. And then I'm over here doing this, having ladies dance Thriller to me when my brother's being taken out on a throne at Wembley Stadium, right? It just blows my mind. And then KSI, he's one who comes up. He comes up pretty often, like in and around the students I teach and that. And I had respect for him up until the build up to this fight. When he was laughing at Tommy Fury, giving it all the WWE stuff, because I'm thinking, this is not WWE. It's not staged, right? You are going to go in there and you are going to have a punch up with him, right? It's not a fight. It's a punch up, glorified kind of punch up. And he jumps in there, he gets in the ring and he starts floating around like Stephen Thompson, right? He's got his arms down, he's jumping in and out, and he runs at him, hugs him, and then gets out there again when he gets punched a few times. And then he has the cheek at the end of it to say, "Oh, I was robbed." I mean, come on, don't be a delusional idiot. Go and do what you're doing. Change the branding, because, like I said, this is misfit. It's not the sport that we want to talk about, and it's not the sport that people like Muhammad Ali, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, to name but a few, kind of made famous and made people respect. It's not the sport that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, longer than MMA has. Right, and we look at the way that the state the two are at the moment, and when you look at that heritage and that history, that is what those men carry on their shoulders, because they are not dressing it up like a soccer aid, right? They're not dressing it up to make sure that people know the difference, because people like me and you will be able to watch that fight and tell that they're absolute dog, right, and wouldn't get on down the local pub. But the average person that this is aimed at, the teenager of these days, will not know the difference. And they will think that these guys generally have a chance against Canelo Alvarez, etc., etc. Generally have a chance at the best in the world. And these idiots are pushing it. They're saying that they're going to go and fight Canelo and all this. Tommy Fury's going to go fight for world titles and all this kind of thing. And it's just delusional thinking. And there's zero consequences to it because of the cult of personality these guys have built up. And that's a massive problem. So that's it for me on those two. Like, they're just, and then you get on to the next two, and it's almost even worse. Like, you don't think it can get worse.
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, for Logan Paul, I don't really have anything against Logan Paul. He's gone off, he's done the WWE thing, he's had a bit of a dance with Floyd Mayweather. It was what it was. You know, there was never any intention to win it. It was just a money-making thing. Fine. You know, he wants to come and have these scraps. Fine. He's a big useless galoot. He's steroided up to the max, just like the WWE guys are. But he's in a professional boxing ring punching somebody else. That doesn't sit right with me, I'll be honest. But he's a big dude. He's athletic. That's it. He's popular. There's nothing else to talk about. I don't really have a dislike for him. If anything, he comes across maybe as one of the better, more chilled out, laid back kind of guys out of these lot. And then on the complete opposite end of that, you've got the troll himself. You know, Dylan Dennis, whose biggest accomplishment in life is being Conor McGregor's mate. And I doubt whether that's even really true. You know what I mean? It just seems like, you know, Conor's never in his corner. He's never in his fights. He sends out a couple of tweets like a best friend would. They're just people that have trained together and they just know each other. And let's be honest, the reality is, Dylan Dennis is an average MMA fighter at that. He has one skill set and it is not using his hands. He's just a jiu-jitsu guy. That's all he is. He's not a great... And let's talk about it and let's be serious about it. He had a couple of submission attempts in this fight and he fucking missed them all.
Yeah.
So he ain't that good. And this was just against Logan Paul, who was sat there just waiting for him. So Dylan Dennis, I mean, Dylan Dennis has done Dylan Dennis. He just robbed everybody. But what did you expect? He's a shit fighter with zero pretty much talent that has done nothing in his professional career to show that he's anything other than just a troll on social media. He doesn't fight. When he does fight, he gets choked out and whatever else by guys when he, you know, a bloke was on the way to have a chocolate cake. That's what happens with Dylan Dennis. That's how good he is. That's his level. We don't need to see him again. He talks about MMA and going in and jumping into the UFC. The UFC will have zero interest in Dylan Dennis. Bellator would likely have no interest in Dylan Dennis anymore. Nothing happened in that fight to make anybody think that Dylan Dennis was a draw. For boxing, for MMA, for anything. You wouldn't touch him with a barge pole. He's a complete and utter waste of time. So that's kind of all I've got to say on it. You know, I'd love to see him get put in there with hands up. I'd love to see it. He'd get absolutely smacked to bits.
He would.
And the fact that Logan Paul, the size he is, couldn't do anything to Dylan Dennis just shows. I mean, here's what I will say for these two. They are very, very lucky that they both made it to the ring. Because had Mike Perry stepped in against either one of them, he would have lit them up.
Yeah.
Absolutely lit them up. So I think that's probably where we'll leave it at, mate, with that. The only thing I will say, and this is what my issue is, we've spent 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, something like that, talking about Dylan Dennis, Logan Paul, KSI, Tommy Fury, John Fury, arses, fucking grabbing testicles, Salt Pappy, Callum the Cucumber, all these idiots, right? And I'm going to do, and over the next 60 to 90 seconds, I'm going to have a quick flash over the actual fights that happened in boxing this weekend. And that's the problem, is that this other stuff gives so many talking points and it's what everybody wants to hear and it's what everyone wants to listen to. You know, we've got Yannick's out there just become a unified world champion, which is confusing to people who aren't in boxing, but basically there are 4 major titles. The WBC, the WBO, the WBA, and the IBF. Yannick holds 2 of those titles now. He had one. This was him winning another one. So he now holds 2 out of the 4 at that weight class. He looked great. His opponent was undermatched. He did what he does. He's an incredible talent, and people need to tune in and start paying attention. But, there was YouTubers fighting, so no one cared. Over on the other side of it, we've got Tim Zhu, who is the son of Costa Zhu, if that name rings any bells to you, who was the famous former world champion and best known, really, among the casual fans for his slugfest with Ricky Hatton. It was Ricky Hatton's most memorable win, really, throughout his career. So his son, Tim Zhu, is an absolute killer. He's basically chomping at the bit to get the fight with Charlo, who just got beat by Canelo. And he would absolutely smash Charlo to bits. He's getting better and better and better. And Tim Zhu is one of those that you need to tune in and watch. But that was it, mate, really. There's a couple of fights there to talk about. They happened over in different countries. We got this bollocks in Manchester. We talked about what would be the episode title and whatnot earlier on. What did we go for? What did we settle on?
The title.
Prats.
The title.
The Pantomime Prats, I think it was, that we settled on, mate.
Yeah, you have sent it to me, but
yeah,
no, that was it. Yeah, the pantomime of Prats. That's exactly what. Well, just out of interest, just before we have to go to the break, how much is the ticket to go? Do you know?
Yeah,
to Manchester.
I never looked to buy one, believe it or not.
No,
so I'm not entirely sure.
Quite curious to know.
Yeah, too much. I pay more to get into a local circus than go watch that shite.
All right then. All right, sound.
Call the break, mate. I need to move on to something else. I need to start previewing some proper fights. Let's jump on to that.
We'll put that one to bed. We'll preview what's coming up this weekend and have a bit of a chat for the village idiot, myself, on boxing, to try and enlighten people and bring them in. So we'll be back in a second.
At Sports UK.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Combat Sports UK podcast. We are talking boxing, not what we were talking about before the break, but we are actually going to talk about boxing. Shit from before the break is not transferring over to after the break. So we're also going to try and incorporate the reasons behind why, as an MMA fan, you find it difficult to be a fan of boxing, what is confusing about boxing, what makes you turn away and turn back to MMA when we're talking about boxing. So we're going to start on home turf. We're going to start in London at the O2 Arena, because this weekend, mate, we've got an absolute firecracker of a main event. So Boxer are the promoter, and they are promoting Dan Aziz against Joshua Buatsi. This is not, as far as I'm aware, an official world title eliminator, but the likelihood is that the winner of this will go on to challenge for a world title, potentially against Dimitri Bivol, who you will probably have heard of from beating Canelo Alvarez.
Yep.
So we've got two fighters here, mate. On one side, we've got an Olympic bronze medalist, undefeated, kind of the hottest prospect coming out of the Olympic Games following that medal. And then since turning pro, has kind of flattered to deceive a little bit. He's not quite turned over to the pro game. He's kind of had tickovers. His opponents have been, and his performance have been even more. So he's winning, and he's winning relatively comfortably, but he's not looking great. He's not looking like the finished article. He's not looking like the prospect we thought he was going to be.
Right.
Okay. Switch that to the other hand, and you've got Dan Aziz. Dan Aziz has not had things easy. He has gone the traditional route. He's fought British fighters. He's stepped up. 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 He's not necessarily gone for has-been kind of, good names, but that maybe aren't on that level anymore. He's kind of fought people at his level, and he's got a bit better, and he's got better, and he's got better. And it's a tough one, mate, because going into this, when you look at the two names on paper, you would say that Josh Buatsi runs away with this. and I said I kind of touched on it a couple of weeks back when we were with Jared, just in passing. And I actually said that I was favouring Buatsi, maybe. Purely on the fact that I believe he has got the talent to do it and he just hasn't shown it yet. But if he comes into this fight, mate, and he performs the way that he has been and he doesn't step it up, Dan Aziz is going to put him in all kinds of bother. Because Dan Aziz will be there for the final bell. He carries power late. He's capable of knocking him out. So it's a real interesting knock, mate. A really, really interesting one. These guys fighting at cruiserweight, so at light heavyweight. So the big guys, the good, solid fighters. Buatsi's got the more flashy skills. Aziz is more of a get in your face and fucking really hurt you kind of fighter. So it's a real interesting knock, mate. It could go either way. I think if Buatsi falls to defeat in this one, we might find that he's found his level. But on the other hand of that, if Dan Aziz was to beat Josh Buatsi, I think it says more about where Dan Aziz has come from and where he's got to. Because Dan Aziz isn't somebody that's kind of had that Olympic route. He's not going to have been earning anywhere near the money that Josh Buatsi's earned, because when they come in from the Olympics as a medalist and they turn pro, they instantly get more money like that because they're a bigger prospect. They carry more weight. They're a bigger opportunity to develop into something. They've got the name recognition and everything's already built in. So for someone like Dan Aziz, it's a much tougher way to get to the top. So this is going to be a belter, mate. We've got a co-main event as well. We've got Isaac Chamberlain and Lowell. This will be for the British Cruiserweight title. Now, Isaac Chamberlain kind of flirted around. Lowell is a champion, but Chamberlain's fought at a higher level.
Right.
He's fallen short at the higher level. He's taken on likes of your Lawrence Okolis, who I would never recommend going to watch if you're a fight fan, because it would look very much like KSI and Tommy Fury, given the highlights I've seen. Lots of hugging, lots of landing and then clinching. It's not fun stuff. But Isaac Chamberlain's kind of had his up and downs. I expect him to come through this one, mate. I think he's, Lowell's a good operator, but I fancy Chamberlain's had a bit of bad luck and he's had a couple of close fights that maybe haven't gone his way. But I think this will be one where he's going to potentially step up. Now, what we'll go on to before we move on to the rest of the events there is there anything in there of those names that you've seen, heard of, seen on social media, where we were talking about how well promoted KSI Tommy Fury is? Has this got the same buzz? This is a fight on British turf.
All I'm going to say, the only one I've heard of is I've heard more about Buatsi. I've heard about this fight, Buatsi versus Aziz. The only reason I've heard of it is because I stick Sky Sports News on in the background when I'm doing bits around the house, and they promote their own fights, right? So I'm assuming this is going to be on Sky Sports because they were talking about it on Sky Sports. Yes,
that's right, yeah.
That's the only reason I know about
if they're talking about it on Sky Sports nowadays, it's on Sky Sports.
Yeah, that's the only
They don't talk about anything that's on anywhere else now, because they've had a bit of a fallout with Mr. Hearn, so anything else will not be touched upon. I mean, we've got some more fights on home turf, mate. But when I talk about this one, the main event is slightly different, because this is Jack Catterall against Jorge Linares. Now, Linares has been there, done it, got the T-shirt, a well-established world champion, 3-weight world champion, in fact. You've got Jack Catterall, who many consider to be the best in the division, because he famously beat, but didn't beat, Josh Taylor on a memorable night in Glasgow. Now, I'm sure you heard about the uproar surrounding that fight, and it's long since kind of passed. But what happened in the aftermath of that is that Josh Taylor was forced to give up his titles. So those titles got fragmented and split all over the place. So Josh Taylor was the undisputed champion at 140 pounds, which meant that those key belts that I was talking about, he held them all.
Yeah.
Now, the Jack Catterall fight should have been, or was for all of those, Jack Catterall should have been the undisputed champion of the world, but he was robbed He was very clearly robbed. This wasn't a close, contentious fight where it could have gone either way, but people thought Catterall won. Everybody thought Jack Catterall won the fight. It wasn't questionable. It was fact. But he was robbed, mate. And how boxing works is not like MMA. So you have the UFC rankings, right? And you have the champion, you have the number one contender, and then you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for you to get to those titles and to get that title shot, you have to beat the guys above you. And you take their spot and you keep climbing the ladder until you're in the position where you are the guy. Now, with boxing, because we have these 4 established governing bodies, the WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF, there's 4 world titles in every weight class to be won. There are a couple of others knocking about, which you might hear about, IBOs and stuff like that. That's bullshit. It's all bollocks. Boxing circles don't pay attention to that, but those key 4, those top 4, are the ones that are kind of the most established. So you're a legitimate world champion if you hold the full version of one of those titles, right? Now, Jorge Linares has held 3 those titles in 3 different weight classes. He's been there. He's a world-class operator, but he's getting older. Jack Catterall, those belts split, and he didn't get to challenge for any of them
because of the Josh Taylor fight.
He lost the Jack. He didn't, but he did officially. He lost the Josh Taylor fight. The belts were fragmented, and what they did was they went, right, this is our number 1 challenger, the WBA. He will fight number 2, 3, 4, whoever it was. The WBC, the IBF, the WBO, they all did the same thing. Jack Catterall wasn't in any of those conversations and wasn't up for becoming a mandatory challenger, if you like, for the world title. So 4 new fights happened between 8 fighters for a world title, and the one guy that missed out on all of that was the guy that just got robbed on winning the actual fight. So Jack Catterall's kind of been a bit of a promotional disaster. And what I mean by that is he's always struggled to get the real backing that he's needed. So he signed with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. And the reason for that was that Eddie Hearn had the current world champions fighting under his stable. So the fight was easy to make. You know, in boxing, there's an issue between promoters making fights between fighters that are signed with other promoters. It would be like the UFC making a fight with a PFL champion or such likes. It just doesn't really happen that easily or that often. So that's the position that we found ourselves in with Jack Catterall. Now, Jack Catterall hasn't been given that. That hasn't happened. What he's been offered instead here is a main event in Liverpool. He's from Manchester-ish. He's that neck of the woods. So it's local. It's in the Echo Arena, which is a bitch to sell. You know, and he's fighting a name in Jorge Linares, but it is the artist formerly known as.
Right, okay.
So we're talking about a George Linares now who's only won 3 fights in his last 8, and he's on a 3-fight losing skid against the guy who one would concede should be undisputed champion of the world. So that's the main event. It's a little lopsided. I expect Jack Catterall to come through that with a breeze. I expect him to win most rounds. Linares is tricky, but he's also past his best. So I expect Catterall to run away with this. Some nice little fights on the undercard, mate. Peter McGrail's fighting, who's a local talent coming out of Liverpool. You've got Reece Bellotti, who's, again, a great fighter that's just fallen short a couple of times, but he's rebuilding now. And Campbell Hatton's also on the card as well. So there's a few names on there to kind of dig your teeth into. That one's over on DAZN on Saturday night from Liverpool. But we are talking here, I mean, exclude the names I just gave you at the end. I've given you Jack Catterall against a past Jorge Linares. I've given you a British cruiserweight fight, which is fair enough, between Chamberlain and Lowell. And I've given you Josh Buatsi and Dan Aziz. So here's my problem. The prime card at the weekend had 2 fights on there that you could say, okay, big names, regardless of the talent, It was all about Logan Paul, Dylan Dennis, KSI, Tommy Fury.
Yeah.
We've got fights over in America. We've got fights here in the UK this weekend. And I've been able to pick out 3.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, admittedly, McGrail, Bellotti are in relatively decent scraps. Campbell Hatton's, again, it's another... But they're not big fights that are drawing the same kind of hype. The only one really out of all of that is the Joshua Dan Aziz one. That's the only one that's kind of getting people's balls tingling. It's an interesting knockout one, but we're talking about a matchroom card. We're talking about a boxer card, and there's fights over in America as well. So we've got 4 maybe different promotional outfits this weekend, putting on events where there will be 10 fights on each card, and we're talking about 3 overall out of them all. That's the problem with boxing. Now, we watched the UFC this weekend, right? And I come on here and I think Jared always thinks, I wish he'd stop doing this because it's going to piss people off, because I always compare boxing to MMA, and I always do so in a negative vein. But I was giving it a bit of thought this week. Because we just got a fight at the Apex, right? For boxing fans that don't know what that is, it's basically behind closed doors. It was what they put up during COVID to allow the UFC to keep functioning and fighters to keep earning a living. That was the whole point of it. It's still going to this day, but we're getting kind of lower level fights. Some good fights on there this weekend, mate. Some close competitive knocks, some standout performances, some good moments, and a little bit of something there for everybody to talk about. Boxing needs to do that. We've got UFC 294 that we'll be previewing on the MMA pod coming up, and every fight's a banger. Every single one of them, you go, fucking hell, get me a bit of that. They are all competitive knocks in their own rights, and every single one of them gets you excited. And there's what is it, 12 fights, something like that?
Yep.
On the card, 12, 13 fights, something along that lines. And every single one of them has got something there where you'll go, I think, is Mo Mokayev opening that card?
I don't know if he's on the prelims or not. I haven't seen the official card.
Yeah.
But he's one of the 2. I mean, you got ranked guys anyway opening up the card.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. The point is, these are top talents, aren't they? Facing somebody on a similar level. Yeah. Now, you don't see that often enough in boxing. What you can do, I mean, there was a card a couple of weeks back before my holidays, mate, where the home promoter who promoted all the fighters in the red corner, every single one of them won. Every single one of them won. Because they weren't in competitive fights. Because you knew who was going. If you'd got a 15 fight accumulator or a 20 fight accumulator, you could genuinely pick 20 to 30 fights over a weekend in boxing, and you would comfortably get 25, 26, 27 out of those 30. Correct.
Yeah.
If you did that if you picked every fight on a UFC card and tried to pick the winner, you'd be lucky if you got half. You might get half.
That would be a miracle,
right? It's just not going to happen. Now, I was thinking about this and thinking, like, why do we see fighters that are MMA guys going over to boxing? It's for that, right? They're coming over for the money. MMA doesn't pay as well as boxing does. The top guys maybe so, but when we talk about guys on prelims or whatever, they're fighting, for pennies in comparison to what certain bang average boxers are kind of earning, right? Yeah. But is that the reason that we get the best against the best in the UFC, for example? Because I'm not a fan of the pay in the UFC. I think the fighters are massively underpaid. But the point I am making is, in boxing, you can be very average and make an absolute killing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want to earn good money as a mixed martial artist, you have to be one of the best in the world. So that means that you have to fight the guys around you. You have to take competitive fights.
Yeah.
5 has to fight 4. 3 has to fight 2. That's kind of the process, because that's the only way you get to the top, and that's when you get your money. That's when the big money comes. With boxing, you get easy little tickovers. I mean, like the Jack Catterall fight, right? Jack Catterall should smoke Linares this weekend. He might not knock him out because, Jack's not the massive puncher and Linares is durable enough. but if he doesn't win 10 out of those 12 rounds, I don't think he'll have done a good job this weekend. That's the main event.
And that's a main event. Yeah, that's a main event.
You know, the boxer one, not so much, because I think it's a real, 60-40, 50-50, whichever way you want to go with it. But it's a close fight. It's competitive. But you're the MMA guy, right, in this conversation. So for you, without talking too much about mixed martial arts, for boxing, what is it about boxing that you just can't get your head around? What is it that makes you think, no, I'll just dip in every now and then when there's a Tyson Fury fight or, something of that ilk?
Yeah, I mean, like I will jump in and say this year, or probably be by the end of the year, will be the most boxing I've seen across the year with Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. I got it. I got it. I remembered it. Usyk and Dubois and Crawford and Spence. And then obviously if Usyk and Tyson happens, those are the ones, because those are the ones you know about, right? When I think about it really obviously, it's only actually just pinged in my head as you were talking there, is when you look at a UFC card, it's clear, right? You have Sadiq Youssef, and it has a little number next to his name that says 11. And you have Edson Barboza, and he has a little number next to his name that says 13. And above that, you have the division, right? And you know that the UFC is the best of the best. That's where it's monopolistic, obviously, which is a good and a bad thing. But when you look at boxing, right? If I was to go to that card now, the O2 one in London, I would have to research to find out about every single fighter. Now, yes, it doesn't happen obviously on every UFC card, but you normally have an idea because they have the rankings and the division and stuff. With any boxing card, whether that's the Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia one we were talking about, you have to go and research who these people are, what division they're fighting in. Is that a pound and a half under the division above them? Is it 6 pounds or whatever above? That's the confusing part, right? It's too many divisions, too many promoters, not enough clarity about what the stakes are for each fight, and like you correctly said, how they line up on a card. Like you can't put on a professional sporting event where one side always wins, and a card like you mentioned before with the red corner, right? You do that in the UFC, you do that. It's like in football, if all the home teams win. You look at that saying, hold on a minute, someone's getting something in their back pocket to make this happen, right? So it's from that, because when I tune in to watch boxing, that I know it's come to me through various outlets, yourselves talking about it. I know that what I'm going to tune into is quality. Like when I was going to watch Garcia and Gervonta Davis, I got up at 4 a.m. to watch that because I knew it was going to be a fight of the century. I knew it was going to be an incredible fight. Spence the same, right? Because so that boxing has got that going for it, that when you get the best of the best together, it's going to be a cracking fight. What was the name? Savannah Marshall and Clarissa Shields. I watched that also. I don't know if that was this year or last year, but I watched it. And I watched Savannah's last fight also, actually. So that's another couple of fights to add to my list, right? Because I knew who they were, where they stood, and what they were fighting for, right? Whereas this one, like Catherine and Linares, if you hadn't have spelled it out there, I would have looked at that and said, oh, well, I remember that Jack Catterall because he had this controversial loss, whatever. Then you're talking about splitting up the belts, and there's 8 fights for 4 belts, and he's not involved in one of them. It's just, you just knock on your head and you just think, nah, you know what? No, it's just too much. I just don't, it seems to be so much, and it's just like, get your act together and you are the best sport in the world, right? Done. Because it's already got the fan base built in.
Yeah, so I mean, if we talk about a UFC title, for argument's sake now, think of a close fight for a UFC title that could have gone either way recently. What's one that jumps to your mind? Let's say Grasso and Shevchenko.
Grasso and Shevchenko, yeah.
Yeah, or either, right? We'll take either of them, but because kind of one of them is happening as a real, we'll go with Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso, right?
Yeah.
Number 1 fighting number 2. It's a no, we're not talking about rematches or anything else like that, but consider this. Alexa Grasso, Valentina Shevchenko go toe to toe. right?
Mhm.
It's not it's competitive, but one of them very clearly wins the fight. Okay, that splits up. Valentina Shevchenko retires. Alexa Grasso is now not in contention for the title shot next. That would be bizarre, right?
Mhm.
And that's one belt. There were
Yeah.
4 here that Jack Catterall could have been fighting for, but it's not how it works, because what you have to do in boxing is you have to pick your way to the top. So we look at someone like Ian Gary in the UFC, right?
Yeah.
Ian Gary, and I'm conscious this is a boxing pod, and I'm naming a lot of MMA fighters, and some might not follow it, right? But Ian Gary's come into the organisation. He's fought somebody next position, and then he's fought somebody higher, and then he's fought somebody higher, and then he picks someone who's 15, and then he picks someone who's 13, and then he picks someone who's 10, and then he's looking at someone who's 7. And that's what he's doing. He's categorically picking his way up the rankings. And that's what happens in boxing. But the problem is with boxing, you're not talking about one set of rankings, you're talking about 4. Because the WBA, the WBO, the IBF, and the WBC rankings are all different.
Yeah.
They all have different fighters in different positions. For example, someone like Anthony Joshua, it's changed recently, but someone like Anthony Joshua, for example, was not even ranked with the WBC.
Yeah.
And yet he held 2 or 3 of the other world titles. It's just insane. How is that guy not the number 1 ranked to challenge for the vacant title?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's the problem with boxing. And I think as well, when we talk about the UFC, you have more of an understanding of the fighters. Like, I could tune into a UFC event, and I'm picking the UFC purely. I know it's not MMA, but we consider the UFC the premier, right?
Yeah.
So even if you said Matchroom Boxing and Eddie Hearn, let's say they were the best promotional outfit on the earth, right, for boxing, that you're considering that exactly the same as you're considering the UFC. Yeah, if you look at the cards, I will tune into the first fight on the UFC on an Apex card, and probably I will have seen one, if not both fighters before.
Yeah.
And when you look at the odds, one will not be stacked massively against the other. It will be, it'll be a little bit, maybe a slight underdog or a slight favourite. And you see that, right? The UFC, when the fight starts, it shows the underdog, the prices, the favourite, the prices, and it's normally minus 150, around that sort of marks in the US market, which tells you in itself that it's relatively close.
Yeah.
And they're not too short. Boxing's not like that. You go onto Sky Bet or Betfair or Bet365 or whoever else, right, and have a look on the Jack Catterall and Jorge Linares card this weekend, right? Look down the odds, and you will be able to see who is going to win every single one of those fights. And if you bet on that, if you put them all into an accumulator, you might get 3-1.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might. If you pick the favourite, you might get 3-1 for the best part of 12 fights. That's the problem with boxing. If you have 2 unknown guys that you weren't that familiar with who were on the first fight of the night, and they both went in there, they were on level pegging, and they had an absolute slugfest, you would think, I remember him, or it's worth getting to an event early. And that's why you see KSI and Tommy Fury. There's people in there from the very first bell on the very first fight. With the UFC, there's people in there very first fight. Boxing doesn't happen.
Yeah,
just doesn't happen. People aren't asked. They don't know who's on the undercard, or they know that it's a takeover. That's one of the biggest problems. One of many.
Yeah, one of the many. It's just that available. And what they do also really well at the UFC is before each fight, they preview the fight and they bring a bit of backstory. Whereas with boxing, they fill it with main event preview. The pacing is very frustrating with a boxing card. It's very very frustrating as an outsider. As an outsider fan who understands the game, and if there was good fights going on, I would absolutely watch boxing every weekend along with the UFC and whatever. But they're just again, it's just not.
We said about the prime card. We said about the prime card, didn't we, this weekend, about how it was for kids. I think the main event didn't start until nearly midnight.
Yeah. That's the bad
Like,
part
if
about
you're
it.
there as a dad and you've got your kids there, you're looking at the time and thinking, "Come on, this is a fucking joke. I'm not coming here." You maybe won't take your kids out, but you might think, "I'm not going there again."
Yeah,
Stopping up till midnight, especially then when you get the fight, you think, "What the fuck did I stop here for?"
yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's it's just insane. But if boxing could just get competitive fights, start to finish, and like you said about the pacing, like the UFC is a little bit different because the way the UFC does it, there's walkouts, but they're not really walkouts.
No, no, no,
You
you're
know,
right.
you're from the locker room to the cage, you might be a minute and a half
Yeah,
tops. On boxing, they spend 2 or 3 minutes up on the fucking stage, and this is for
yeah,
people that have had one professional fight.
yeah,
It,
exactly.
it, and then you go to a bunch of adverts and everything else. The UFC is go, 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 and one fight is rolled out after the next. And the only break that you get is between the prelim card and the main card, where they'll do a little bit of a review. But
Yeah,
everything else is quick. It's fast paced. It's just boxing's just got so much more to learn. I mean, I saw already heard in an interview this week saying that there was a lot that real boxing could learn from, the Misfits card at the weekend.
yeah,
And I thought, you're looking in the wrong direction. The UFC is where you learn, roll the fights out, make them competitive.
yeah,
That's all people want to see. If you're putting competitive fights on, people will tune in to watch it.
yeah.
If
That's
you're
it.
putting on knockovers that you already know who's going to win, what are you tuning in for? You might as
Yeah,
well record it and watch it the next day if you can be
yeah.
asked.
And just develop some consistency. Like
Mm-hmm.
you know more or less the monthly or yearly layout of what the UFC is going to do. And
Oh, there's some
we're boxing.
consistency.
Yeah, we're boxing. I
It's
don't know.
consistently shit.
It's consistently shit. Yeah, we're boxing. Like I said to you before, the only reason I know about Buatsi and Aziz is because I've heard it on Sky Sports News, and I know Sky Sports News are interested in Sky Sports, so I know that's probably where
Yep.
it's going to be on. Probably, right? I'm making an educated guess.
Yep.
With this Jack
Mm-hmm.
Catterall Jorge Linares fight, if I said to you right now, I'm going to watch that on Saturday. If I didn't ask you where I could probably watch that, I would get to Saturday and be like, the Zone,
Yeah. Yeah.
TNT,
And you know,
not Sky
and
Sports.
you know the funny thing is, Taylor? Boxing was at its best in the UK when Eddie Hearn and Matchroom's boxing were with Sky Sports. Because what you had is you had Matchroom boxing on Sky Sports and you had Frank Warren and Queensbury, so the two biggest promoters in Britain
Yeah,
were on Sky Sports and BT Sports,
yeah,
as it was. That then has split and Matchroom pissed off over onto DAZN. And I'll be honest with you, mate, it doesn't have the same pop. Because I mean, we had the Canelo fight on the other week, and the fucking DAZN feed went down in the third round.
Oh God.
This is a
And you're
Canelo
paying for
fight.
that as well. You're paying a monthly subscription for
Yeah,
that. You are for Sky
yeah,
as well.
yeah. But you look at Sky Sports, for example, and like what you're saying, then Sky Sports has got that, and BT is the same, but Sky Sports people put on Sky Sports News, and they will talk about golf, cricket, boxing, MMA, whatever's coming up. They'll talk about it all, and they will throw it in your face, or they'll chuck it up on the right hand side over here, and it'll say Buatsi versus Aziz live on Sky Sports Saturday night. It's right there. You can't miss it. Even if you're not a boxing fan, you know there's some boxing going off on Saturday night because it's there. With DAZN, unless you've got the subscription and you're tuning into the channel or following them on socials, you can't see it.
Yeah,
You don't know what's on. I had to, before we started this, I had to Google to see who. I didn't realise Campbell Hatton was fighting. I'd not really dug into this card, mate, if I'm honest. I knew that Jack Catterall and Linares were on it, and I knew that Peter McGrail was fighting, and that was it.
Yeah. And that's
Because I haven't seen anything. And I'm a boxing fan. But it's because I don't really dig into the cards unless I have to talk about them at some point, because the reality of the situation is more often than not, I have a look and I go, yeah, shit, I just thought it would be. and that's the problem with it. But look, it's been one of them. I mean, the last couple of weeks I was quite positive. One, because I wasn't here, and two, because we had the Canelo fight. But look, it's just boxing, mate. It needs to do better, and it knows it needs to do better. But when it's right, it's the best sport in the world. It's
So
just very rare that they get it right.
just before you take us home, like on that, are you positive about something like the Fury and Ngannou, and then the Fury announcing the Usyk as well? Where do you sit with that, like as a boxing boxing fan.
So Fury and Ngannou, quick version, is it's not a competitive fight.
No.
I understand why Fury is doing it because it's a massive, massive payday.
Yeah.
For a fight that he's going to win comfortably. I understand why Ngannou's doing it because it's a massive, massive payday in a fight. He's expected to lose every minute of every round that it lasts.
Yeah.
And so, from the fighter's point, I get it. Tyson Fury is the WBC world champion. He should be stripped because he's not defending his title. He's not defending it against Ngannou. He's not defending it against his mandatory challenger. He's just sat holding it. So the rest of the heavyweight division is going,
Yeah, exactly.
what's happening?
Yeah.
Can I have my fight? Or that's the problem with it. Now, that's live with the WBC. The only reason I can imagine, do you know what the thing is? They're dodgy as fuck anyway. What I would say normally is the only thing I can imagine is that they know that the Usyk and Fury fight is happening next. So they've been patient. They've come to an agreement with Fury, and that's why he hasn't been stripped. But the WBC have also got champions that have still got a belt over the shoulder and haven't fought for the last 2 years.
Doesn't happen in the UFC, does
it? So I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. And they can't bring in an interim title because they already have them. There's belts scattered about for the,
And then if you've got
I've got less decorations on my Christmas tree than there's belts in boxing.
If you've got a scale, right? Last thing of this evening, if you've got a scale, right? If you've got this weekend at the bottom of it, so you've got the Misfits at the bottom, and you've got what's been the best fight this year? Probably Tank and Davis, right? Or Crawford Spence at the top.
Yeah.
Where are you
Crawford
putting?
Spence was a bigger one.
Where are you putting Ngannou and Fury on that scale? Where does it sit?
Probably marginally above the Misfits.
Marginally above. Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah. Marginally above because it's not real boxing and it's not competitive.
Yeah.
So will I watch it? Yes, because I'm a fan of both sports. I'd kind of just like to see Ngannou fight.
See what he does.
It's not anything to do with
see what he does.
It's not the fact that I think he's going to win. It's just that I enjoy watching him fight, and it's a big talking point. Everyone's interested. I'm actually more interested in the fight between David Adelaide and Fabio Wardley on that because that's a real competitive knock between two.
From what I've heard, they have stacked the undercard a bit better, right?
There's a couple of fights on there, yeah. There's a couple of little decent scraps. So, but I'm more interested in them. The main event is just a spectacle. It is what it is.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe the Saudis will save us all.
Well, I think the Fury Usyk chat sounds positive. It sounds like it's genuine and it's heading in the right direction. It's potentially gonna happen. But anybody in boxing will say exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
There's no date. There's no venue. But both fighters have signed. That means nothing. Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua had agreed a deal to fight. That's not happening because the venue fell out. So until both boxers are in the ring, I won't believe that fight's happening.
I'm not letting my expectations outweigh what the reality of boxing is sometimes. So
not even going to get the pre-order on the paper. You're going to wait on social media until they're actually doing the ring walks, then buy.
I wouldn't be booking hotels and flights anyway, put it that way. But yeah, it's look, obviously we had a couple of little breaks. The background's all changed here, as some people will tell. They've got the shiny head out. The hat's gone. The background's changed. The missus has kicked me downstairs for making too much noise. So on that note, we'll sign it. We'll sign off. This has been the pantomime of Prats, fetched to you by two well-established Prats ourselves. So thank you for sticking with us and for tuning in. This is Combat Sports UK. Go ahead to Apple Play, Spotify, click onto YouTube, watch us on there if you want to see our stupid faces along with hearing our stupid voices, and leave some comments, leave some likes. Let us know if you like the podcast. If you don't like the podcast, positive, negative reviews are fine. We just want to know what you guys are thinking. So any feedback you could give us will be greatly appreciated. Head over, follow Combat Sports UK. We've got the website, we've got Instagram, we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got TikTok as well. So head over there. You can find us on all those platforms, Combat Sports UK. Taylor, thanks for joining me, mate. And I'll leave you with the editing privileges tonight.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. And do everything Nathan said to put a smile on his face so that Jared doesn't have to put up with that next week. All right. Cheers, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, mate. Ta-da.